Invasive species, exotic species. What does this actually mean? Welcome to another episode of Steele Creek Explorer. I'm your host, Jeremy Stout, and today we're going in search of aliens. And by aliens, I don't mean aliens from outer space, non-native wildlife, plants and animals that are here in our area from other parts of the world. Well, many are surprised to learn that you can find non-native plants and animals without even leaving your yard. We're not even 50 feet away from the nature center, and we have found a number of non-native plant species growing right out here in the yard. Many of our species of grass that occur in our lawns and the edges of our gardens are non-native to not just to Tennessee, but to North America. Even some of our most common yard plants that you're probably familiar with. White clover was brought here. It's native to Europe and Asia. It was brought here as a grazing plant for livestock. Broadleaf plantain, also called the common plantain, was brought here for its medicinal qualities. And even one of the most common yard plants, the dandelion, was brought here from Europe for many of its edible and medicinal properties. Right here in the yard, many, if not most, of the plants growing out there are not actually native to North America. But let's see what we can find elsewhere in the park. All right, well, many of our non-native plants and animals have been here for centuries. Dandelions likely came over on the Mayflower itself. But some of our other non-native wildlife has actually been here for much less time. This is the most common turtle in Steele Creek Park. This is the red-eared slider. Now, they are native to North America, but their native range is mostly coastal regions and near in and around the Mississippi River Valley. This was a very commonly sold turtle as pets. And so folks would buy these turtles when they were about the size of a 50-cent piece and nice and cute, and they would bring them home, and not understanding that they would live to be 35 years old and get to be the size of a dinner plate, and the upkeep is very laborious and expensive. So what did most folks do who had these unwanted pet sliders? They took them down to their local park or creek and turned them loose. So after several decades of that, these introduced species have reproduced here. They're doing very well. And they are now out competing some of our native turtles in Steele Creek Park and the surrounding area. Many of our non-native plants and animals have varying degrees of damage or potential damage that they can cause once they're introduced into a non-native environment. Possibly the worst, maybe the most frightening and destructive invasive animal in our region is not the tree itself right here, it's on the tree. You can see this white fluff at the base of each needle of this hemlock branch. This is actually an animal inside this white fluff called the hemlock woolly adelgid. This was a little bug that stowed away on some nursery plants from Asia almost 100 years ago, and it has been threatening our native hemlock species with possible extinction. This is a very scary bug because it not only threatens the hemlocks, but hemlocks, especially the eastern hemlock that we have here in Steele Creek Park, forms vast tracts of habitat, hemlock habitat that a lot of other organisms depend on. And this little bug threatens all of that. The little white fluff may not look like much, but each one of those little white fluff balls is an animal buried underneath that attaches itself to the base of the hemlock needle and drinks all of the sap that would be available to the needle. If it were only one or two of these, the tree would have no problem. But once a tree is infested, there can be literally millions of these adelgids. And at least with our native eastern hemlock that we have in Steele Creek Park, the mortality rate after it's infested with the hemlock woolly adelgid is 100%, meaning without the use of pesticides to keep the trees alive, they are guaranteed to die from this non-native pest. Here in Steele Creek Park, we do preserve our trees with pesticides to keep those habitats alive. So just because a species is non-native to our region or to our continent doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. But conversely, just because something was brought here doesn't mean that we want it here. Here are two non-native species in one. This is a Japanese beetle that was brought here accidentally over 100 years ago. Is an aggressive eater of many different kinds of plants, defoliates and skeletonizes leaves wherever it finds them, and it's expanding its range. The Japanese beetle is bad news. But here you see it feeding on a non-native butterfly bush. This is a bush that we actually planted here at the Nature Center because at least here and when it's controlled, its benefits to even our local and native wildlife seem to outweigh the potential cost of it being a non-native species. Butterfly bush can become invasive under some circumstances, but here at the Nature Center it provides a valuable food source for nectaring butterflies and other critters. Here's a common bird that comes to many of our homes and gardens. This is a non-native species. This is called a house finch. This was a popular finch in the pet trade until the first of them started to accidentally be released or let go. And when it became illegal to keep these birds as pets, many shopkeepers just released the birds that they had in stock. This is a bird that's only been in East Tennessee as a wild species for the last few decades. Well, the things we discovered right around the Nature Center today are only a fraction of the non-native plants and animals that call our region home. European starlings, brown marmorated stink bugs, garlic mustard. There are all kinds of other species, some that can cause great harm, others that we actually depend on. The European honeybee, as the name would suggest, honeybees aren't native to the New World, and yet we depend on those species for many of the food plants that we depend on. So non-native species abound. Wherever you look, you can find them. Don't demonize them, don't hate them just because they're non-native, but do understand that we as a species change our world wherever we encounter it. Some of those changes are not the best. But whether you're looking for natural wildlife or non-native wildlife, be sure to come to Steele Creek Park because that's where you can be the explorer.